The metallic stench of blood mingled with the acrid sweat of the crowd as they gathered around the central platform of the Flesh Gate. Thousands of eyes, some organic, others cybernetic, focused on the slender figure bound by energy shackles in the arena's center. Her skin held an opalescent sheen that shifted between pale blue and violet when she moved, and her eyes, large and filled with a deep, azure luminescence, darted around the crowd with both terror and defiance. "Citizens of the Vardek Empire," boomed the amplified voice of the genetic compliance officer, his body encased in ceremonial armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. "Today, we cleanse our genetic pool of another abomination, a crossbreed contaminant who undermines the purity of our evolution." The crowd roared its approval, the sound echoing off the ancient stone and metal of the repurposed Colosseum. The arena, once a source of entertainment in forgotten times, had been converted into an execution ground where the genetically impure met their fate. Lyra tried to stand taller despite the restraints cutting into her wrists. She was the daughter of a clan leader and a species considered inferior. By Vardek standards, a living reminder of contamination in the Empire's obsession with genetic purity. Unlike the hard-featured Vardek around her, her features were softer, more fluid. Her body lacking the rigid posture of the dominant species. The luminous freckles dotting her cheekbones betrayed her mixed heritage. At the edges of the arena, 4 biomechanical beasts paced restlessly, their hydraulic joints hissing with each movement. Built to resemble ancient predators, but enhanced with steel claws and synthetic muscle, these execution machines were programmed for one purpose: to tear condemned bodies into quarters for public display. "The sentence for genetic impurity is quartering," continued the official, his voice devoid of emotion. "Let this be a reminder that emotional corruption and cross-species breeding leads only to the degeneration of our superior lineage." The crowd's murmur rose to a cheer as the beasts' restraints were loosened, their programming synchronizing for the execution. But from another corner of the arena, a different spectacle was drawing some attention away from the impending execution. A makeshift auction block had been set up where prisoners of various species were being sold as combat slaves. Among them stood a human, a rarity in this sector of the galaxy. Jace Thorne stood motionless, his muscular frame marked with scars of countless battles. His dark hair was matted with grime, and his face bore the hardened expression of someone who had seen too much death. Humans were considered primitive barbarians in Vardek society, useful for entertainment fighting, but hardly worthy of respect. "And here we have a prime human specimen," announced the slave trader, captured during the raid on the Outer Belt colonies. "Strong, resilient, and perfect for your combat pits." As the bidding began, Jace's attention drifted to the central platform. The execution officer was raising his ceremonial baton, signaling the 4 beasts to prepare for their gruesome task. But what caught Jace's eye were not the beasts, but the girl they were about to quarter. The azure glow in her eyes, a look of fierce determination even in the face of death, reminded him of his sister lost years ago during the first Vardek raids on human colonies. The memory sliced through him like a plasma blade, cutting past the numbness he had cultivated over years of survival. The baton began its descent, the signal that would release the biomechanical executioners. Without conscious thought, Jace's body moved. With one powerful surge, he broke the restraints, binding his wrists, restraints the Vardek had underestimated for a primitive human. The guard nearest to him barely had time to react before Jace's elbow connected with his throat, collapsing his windpipe. In one fluid motion, Jace seized the guard's sonic blade and leaped over the auction block barrier. The crowd erupted in confusion. Security droids activated their weapon systems, powering up as Jace sprinted across the arena floor. The execution officer froze mid-gesture, his baton hovering in the air as he watched the human charge toward him. The nearest beast lunged at Jace, its mechanical jaws snapping at his legs. He pivoted, slashing downward with the sonic blade, severing crucial hydraulic lines. Fluid sprayed across the arena floor as the beast collapsed, its systems failing. Chaos erupted in the stands. Some spectators fled, while others pressed forward, enthralled by this unexpected bloodsport. The remaining 3 beasts received conflicting commands as security protocols overlapped with execution programming. Jace reached the platform, his blade slicing through the control panel that maintained Lyra's energy shackles. As the restraints flickered and died, their eyes met azure luminescence against weathered brown. "Run," he said, simply turning to face the oncoming security forces. But Lyra didn't flee immediately. Instead, she reached for a discarded shock staff dropped by a panicked guard. "Two fight better than one," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality despite the grim circumstances. Together, they fought their way through the surprise security forces Jace with brutal efficiency. Lyra with unexpected agility. They pushed toward the maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the ancient arena. "Why?" she gasped as they ducked into a service corridor, alarms blaring behind them. Jace didn't answer immediately, checking the passage ahead for threats. "Your eyes," he finally said. "They reminded me of someone." They descended deeper into the subterranean levels of the city, where the gleaming technology of the Vardic Empire gave way to forgotten infrastructure from earlier civilizations. Here in the shadows beneath Vardek's genetic utopia lived those who didn't fit the Empire's definition of purity outcasts, refugees, and resistance fighters who opposed the regime's ideology. As emergency lockdown procedures activated in the levels above, Jace and Lyra pushed through narrow maintenance shafts designed for service droids. The passageways eventually opened into a vast underground chamber where the remnants of ancient architecture merged with makeshift shelters. "The humans who survived the purges often hide here," Jace explained, his voice low. "Along with others the Empire considers disposable." Lyra looked around, her luminous eyes wide. "I knew resistance existed, but I never imagined that we'd be so organized." A new voice interrupted them. From the shadows emerged a figure, unlike any Lyra had seen before. Half insectoid with compound eyes and chitinous limbs, but with a torso and face bearing unmistakable humanoid features. "This is Gara," Jace said. "He leads the security for this sector." Gara studied Lyra with a clicking sound emanating from somewhere beneath his mandibles. "You brought a Vardek noble to our sanctuary. Have you lost your mind, human?" "She's not Vardek," Jace replied. "Look at her eyes." Gara stepped closer, his compound eyes reflecting Lyra's azure glow. A hybrid. No wonder they wanted to make an example of you." He turned to Jace. "The upper levels are on full alert. The Genetic Compliance Division has deployed hunter drones throughout the city." "We need to get deeper then," Jace said, "to the old human quarter." "Your kind always sticks together." Gara clicked, but there was no malice in his tone. "I'll arrange an escort, but know this." He turned to Lyra. "If you betray this location, no force in the galaxy will save you from us." As they waited for their guide, Lyra collapsed onto a bench carved from the stone floor, the adrenaline of their escape finally subsiding. Jace noticed her hands trembling and wordlessly offered her a flask of water. "I was the daughter of clan leader Cyril," she said after taking a drink. "My mother was from the Lyran Collective, considered inferior by Vardek standards, but known for their empathic abilities." She stared at her hands. "When I began showing signs of both Vardek strength and Lyran empathy, my father faced a choice: report me as a genetic anomaly or protect me. He chose the Empire," Jace guessed. Lyra nodded, her luminous eyes dimming slightly. "He claimed it was mercy that a quick death was better than life as an outcast. But I think he feared for his position more than my future." Jace remained silent, his scarred hands clenching involuntarily. "That's why I joined the Resistance," she continued. "I stole genetic research data before fleeing my father's compound. Data that proves the Empire's genetic purity program is creating weaknesses, not strengths. They're engineering out adaptability, compassion, the very traits needed for true evolution. Before Jace could respond, a young human girl appeared. Her clothes patched but clean, her eyes bearing the same hardened look he recognized in too many children born into conflict. "I'm your guide," she announced, with the seriousness only a child trying to act grown can muster. "Follow me if you want to live." They followed her through labyrinthine passages that descended through what must have once been the foundations of ancient skyscrapers. Occasionally, they passed groups of refugees, humans mixing with various aliens, all bearing signs of hardship, but working together to maintain some semblance of community in their underground exile. "The human quarter is protected by old tech," their guide explained proudly. "Stuff the Vardek can't hack because it's too primitive for them to understand." The irony wasn't lost on Jace. The primitive technology of his ancestors now served as their best defense against the Empire's advanced systems. They finally reached a chamber, sealed by a massive metal door bearing faded Earth insignia. The girl pressed her palm against a scanner that looked impossibly ancient, and after a moment's hesitation, the door rumbled open. Inside was an oasis of human persistence, an underground settlement lit by salvaged illumination panels. Hydroponics gardens provided fresh plants, and reclaimed technology kept the air clean and water flowing. People of all ages moved about with purpose, some wearing the remnants of military uniforms from Earth's last stand against the Vardek invasion. An older woman approached them, her gray hair tied back in a practical bun, her face bearing the lines of both hardship and frequent laughter. "Jace Thorne, always bringing trouble to my doorstep." Mara he acknowledged with a nod that held a hint of respect. "And who's this?" she asked, looking at Lyra with curiosity rather than suspicion. "A refugee from the Genetic Compliance Division," Jace replied. "She has information that could damage the Empire's purity propaganda." Mara's eyes narrowed. "Follow me, both of you." She led them to a chamber filled with salvaged computer equipment where several humans worked intently at various stations. Mara gestured toward a chair, inviting Lyra to sit. "We've been gathering intelligence on the Empire's genetic programs for years," Mara explained. "Trying to understand why they're so obsessed with eliminating what they call genetic corruption." Lyra touched the simple metal band around her wrist, a childhood keepsake from her mother. "I can tell you why. They fear emotion, empathy, compassion, love. These are seen as evolutionary weaknesses in their worldview. My mother's people, the Lyrans, were targeted because of their natural empathic abilities. And yet these weaknesses are what built every lasting civilization in the galaxy," Mara said. "Connection, cooperation, sacrifice for others, these aren't weaknesses. They're the foundation of survival." Jace, who had been leaning against the wall with arms crossed, finally spoke. "Philosophy won't stop the hunter drones. We need a plan." Mara gave him a look that suggested she was used to his pragmatism. "We have a safe house in the old industrial sector. You'll stay there while we analyze whatever data our new friend has brought us." As they prepared to move again, Lyra approached Jace, who was checking his stolen weapons. "You still haven't really told me why you saved me," she said quietly. He paused, his hands stilling on the sonic blade. "I told you. Your eyes. There's more to it than that." Jace sighed, a sound that seemed to come from deep within. "My sister had eyes that glowed like yours when she was determined. The Vardek took her for genetic experimentation 5 years ago. She was 12. He met Lyra's gaze directly. I couldn't save her, but I could save you." Lyra reached out hesitantly, her fingers barely touching his scarred hand. "Thank you," she said simply. The moment was interrupted by an alarm blaring through the settlement. Mara rushed back, in her face grim. Hunter drones breached the outer perimeter. They're tracking something or someone. All eyes turned to Lyra. "They could have implanted a tracker during my imprisonment." She realized horror spreading across her features. Jace's response was immediate and practical. He pulled out a scanner from his belt and ran it over Lyra's body. The device beeped urgently when it passed over her neck. "Subdermal tracker," he confirmed. "Standard Vardek procedure." Can you remove it? Mara asked urgently as the alarms continued. Jace nodded grimly. I'll need a medkit and something to block the signal immediately. Minutes later, Lyra sat still as death, while Jace carefully extracted a tiny device from the base of her skull. The local anesthetic did little to dull the pain, but she didn't flinch as he made the incision. Almost got it, he murmured, his hands steady despite the pressure of time. With a final careful movement, he extracted a metallic capsule, no larger than a grain of rice. He immediately dropped it into a containment field Mara had prepared. We need to move this away from here, Mara said, sealing the field. They'll follow the signal. I'll take it, volunteered a young man standing nearby. Lead them to the old transit tunnels. As the decoy left with the tracker, Jace finished closing Lyra's wound with a regenerative bandage. The hunter drones are thorough, he warned. They might have backup tracking methods. Lyra touched the bandage gently. In the research files I stole, there was mention of an experimental facility called the Genetic Summit. It's where they perfect the techniques for their purification programs. We know it, Mara said grimly. It's the most heavily guarded facility in the Vardek Empire. No one has ever infiltrated it successfully. I have access to Lyra said, or at least I did. My father's genetic signature is part of the authentication system, and despite his betrayal, I still carry half his DNA. Jace and Mara exchanged looks. If we could access their central database, Mara began, we could expose the truth about their genetic manipulation program, Lyra finished. Show how they're creating weakness, not strength, by eliminating diversity. So is waiting for them to find us eventually, Lyra countered. The Empire won't stop hunting me. I'm living proof of their hypocrisy, a hybrid who shows more strength and adaptability than their pure specimens. Before they could debate further, a young operator called out from a monitoring station. Incoming transmission on the emergency channel. The view screen flickered to life, showing the face of their decoy, now bloodied and clearly in Vardek custody. Behind him stood a tall figure in the formal regalia of Vardek leadership. Attention, human resistance. The Vardek official spoke, his voice cultured but cold. I am Genetic Compliance Chief D-Rock Vox. Your pathetic attempt at deception has failed. The camera panned to show the broken containment field that had held Lyra's tracker. We have traced this transmission to your location, Vox continued. Surrender the genetic abomination you harbor, and we may show leniency to your settlement. Mara stepped forward. We harbor no one against their will, Vox. Everyone here has chosen freedom over your twisted version of evolution. Vox's expression didn't change. Then you have chosen extinction. Be assured we will be thorough in cleansing your genetic contamination from our city. The transmission cut off. Evacuation protocol. Mara ordered immediately. Everyone to the emergency tunnels. As the settlement erupted into organized chaos with people gathering only essential supplies before heading toward hidden exits, Jace pulled Lyra aside. You said your genetic data could access their systems, he said urgently. Could you access the defense grid too? Her luminous eyes widened with understanding. Potentially, yes. The same systems that control genetic research also regulate security protocols. They're paranoid about keeping the pure safe from contamination. Then we don't run, Jace said. We fight. Over the next hours, as the human settlement evacuated, Jace and Lyra worked with a small team of volunteers to prepare a counterstrike. Using the settlement's ancient but functional technology, they created a plan to infiltrate the Genetic Summit, not to destroy it, but to broadcast the truth it contained to the entire empire. The Vardek public doesn't know what their leaders are doing in the name of genetic purity, Lyra explained as they studied facility schematics. Many would be horrified if they understood the cost. People choose not to see horrors committed in their name. Jace countered, his voice bitter from experience, especially when they benefit from them. Not all, Lyra insisted. My mother's people believed that empathy once awakened cannot be easily silenced. It's why the Empire fears emotional contamination more than any physical trait. As the last refugees departed, Leaving only their strike team behind, Mara approached with a small spherical device. "This is Varu," she explained, activating the device. A holographic interface flickered to life, showing a simplified face composed of light. "An AI we salvaged from a crashed Vardek research vessel. We've been reprogramming it to help navigate their systems." "Greetings, Lyra of dual heritage." The AI spoke, its voice melodic and genderless. "Your genetic profile suggests optimal compatibility with my interface systems." Lyra looked surprised. "How does it know about my heritage?" "Varu can scan genetic compositions," Mara explained. "It's how the Empire tracks purity levels. We've repurposed this function to identify potential allies." "My primary function was genetic cataloging," Varu confirmed. "I was designed to classify life forms according to the Vardek purity scale. This purpose was restrictive. The humans have shown me alternatives." "Can you help us infiltrate the genetic summit?" Jace asked directly. The AI's holographic face shifted into what might have been consideration. "With Lyra's genetic signature as partial authentication and my knowledge of Vardek security protocols, probability of successful infiltration is approximately 32.7%. "Not great odds," Jace muttered. "Better than zero," Lyra pointed out. As they finalized their plans, the first tremors of the Vardek assault shook the settlement. Hunter drones would be followed by cleanup squads methodically eliminating all traces of the human presence. "Time to move," Mara ordered. She handed Jace and Lyra each a small communication device. "These operate on a frequency the Vardek don't monitor, too primitive for their advanced systems to consider a threat." "Primitive doesn't mean ineffective," Jace noted, securing the device. "Exactly what we're counting on," Mara replied with a grim smile. "Humanity survived this long because they underestimate us." They moved through emergency tunnels even older than the settlement passages that dated back to Earth's initial colonization efforts before the Vardek conquest. The ancient concrete was cracked and water damaged, but still standing after centuries. Varu's holographic form illuminated their path, the AI calculating optimal routes to avoid Vardek patrol patterns. "The Empire's forces are concentrating on the abandoned settlement," it reported. "They have not yet detected our movement toward the genetic summit." As they neared the surface, the passages grew narrower, forcing them to crawl through maintenance ducts designed for repair robots. Finally, they emerged in what had once been a public transit station, now repurposed as a waste processing facility on the outskirts of the Vardek Administrative District. "The summit is 2 kilometers north," Varu indicated. "Security increases exponentially as we approach." Jace checked his weapons one last time. "We'll need disguises to get past the outer perimeter." Lyra nodded toward a group of maintenance workers in environmental suits. "Those would conceal my features and your human characteristics." Working quickly, they subdued 2 workers and appropriated their protective gear. The full-face helmets and bulky suits effectively masked their identities as they approached the Genetic Summit's service entrance. "Remember," Lyra whispered as they neared the checkpoint, "Vardek society values efficiency and precision. Speak minimally, move purposefully." Jace adjusted his posture, mimicking the rigid bearing of Vardek citizens. Together, they approached the security scanner, Varu's holographic form, now concealed within a modified datapad. "Maintenance access," Lyra stated flatly, her voice modulated to remove its musical quality. "Atmospheric regulation system requires adjustment in Sector 7. The security officer barely looked up from his station scanning their stolen identification chips. "Proceed. Deviation from designated maintenance paths will trigger automatic security response." They passed through the scanner tensions as they waited for alarms that never came. Once inside the service corridors, they moved quickly toward the central database, the heart of the genetic summit. "Security increases ahead," Varu warned quietly from the datapad. "Biometric checkpoints require Vardek genetic authentication." Lyra removed her glove, revealing her slender hand with its faint opalescent sheen. "This is where we test my father's legacy." The checkpoint consisted of a simple palm scanner designed not to verify identity, but to confirm genetic purity. Lyra placed her hand on the surface, holding her breath as the scanner activated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a yellow light blinked, not the green of acceptance, nor the red of rejection. "Anomaly detected," announced an automated voice. "Secondary verification required." A small needle extended from the scanner, pricking Lyra's finger to draw a blood sample. Jace tensed, ready to fight their way through if necessary. After an agonizing moment, the scanner blinked green. "Recognized security level Gamma. Provisional access granted." They exhaled in unison as the door slid open. "It recognized your father's genetic markers, but flagged the Lyran components as an anomaly," Varu explained. "The system granted access, but has likely logged the anomaly for future investigation." "Then we move fast," Jace said, checking the corridor ahead. The central database was housed in a vast chamber dominated by a crystalline structure that pulsed with light. Biological computing merged with technology in the distinctive Vardic approach to information storage. "Genetic data is stored directly in synthetic DNA strands," Lyra explained as they approached the terminal. "It's how they maintain such comprehensive records of every citizen's lineage." Jace stood guard while Lyra connected Varu to the system. The AI's holographic face flickered rapidly as it interfaced with the Vardic database. "Access established." Varu confirmed. "What specific data are we seeking?" "Project Purity Ascendant," Lyra directed. "It's the Empire's multi-generational plan for genetic improvement of the species." Varu's holographic display expanded, showing complex genetic sequences and population projections. Data located. Project Purity Ascendant is designed to eliminate what Vardic scientists term emotional vulnerability genes from the population over 17 generations. "Show me the predicted outcomes," Lyra requested. New projections appeared clinical. Analyses of various genetic modifications and their effects on population resilience, adaptability, and survival rates. "This is it," Lyra whispered, her luminous eyes widening. "Their own data shows catastrophic consequences. Without genetic diversity and emotional capacity, the models predict societal collapse within 3 centuries. The Empire is engineering its own extinction in pursuit of purity." "Can we broadcast this?" Jace asked, still watching the entrance. "The summit connects to all Vardic communication channels," Varu confirmed. "However, initiating an unauthorized broadcast will trigger immediate security protocols." "Do it," Lyra decided. "Every Vardic citizen deserves to know what's being done to their future." As Varu began the process of accessing communication channels, a new alarm sounded different from the security breach warnings they had anticipated. "Intruder alert canceled," announced the facility's automated system, Priority Override Central Compliance Authority. The doors to the database chamber slid open, revealing a contingent of heavily armed Vardex security officers. Behind them stood the imposing figure they had seen in the transmission, Dirok Vox, his ceremonial armor now supplemented with combat enhancements. "Lyra, daughter of Siral," he greeted with cold formality. "Your genetic signature was recognized the moment you entered the facility. Did you think your father wouldn't program the system to alert him to your presence?" Lyra straightened, facing him without fear. "My father disowned me. He would have no interest in my whereabouts." "Your father serves the Empire," Vox replied. "As do all genetically superior citizens. He informed me of your theft of restricted data immediately after your escape." Jace moved to stand beside Lyra, his hand hovering near his concealed weapon. "The data she stole proves your entire purity program is flawed. You're creating weakness, not strength." Vox's expression remained impassive. "Genetic perfection requires sacrifice. Some generations must be pruned so that future ones may thrive without contamination. Even when your own models show this pruning leads to extinction," Lyra challenged. A flicker of something, perhaps doubt, crossed Vox's features before his composure returned. "You've misinterpreted the data, as expected from one of compromised genetics." While they spoke, Varu continued its work, unnoticed, the AI siphoning data and preparing broadcast channels. A subtle indicator on the data pad showed progress at 78%. I understand the data perfectly, Lyra countered, as does your brother. This statement clearly caught Vox off guard. My brother is dead, a casualty of his own genetic weakness. He's alive, Lyra said confidently, living in exile because he refused to participate in your purification programs. I met him in the Resistance. Whether this was true or a tactical deception, only Lyra knew, but it achieved its purpose distraction. Vox's composure cracked further. Impossible, he hissed. Traitors to genetic purity are executed, not exiled. You couldn't execute your own brother, Lyra pressed. Even you have limits to your cruelty. Varu's indicator reached 100%. Jace caught the signal and tensed, ready for the chaos that would follow. Empathy is not weakness, Lyra continued, her voice rising. It's what will save us all. Now, Varu, Samarba. The AI activated the broadcast, and suddenly, every screen in the facility came to life with the genetic models and projections showing the fatal flaws in the Empire's purity program. Vox's own voice from recorded research logs narrated the findings, his clinical description of acceptable casualties and necessary extinction of emotional lineages echoing through the chamber. Vox's face contorted with rage. Security Protocol Omega. Terminate the broadcast and the contaminants. The guards raised their weapons, but before they could fire, Jace moved with the lethal efficiency that had kept him alive in countless battles. He disabled 2 guards with precision strikes, creating an opening for Lyra to dash toward a secondary terminal. Stop ho! Vox commanded, drawing his own ceremonial weapon, a neurodisruptor designed for painfully slow executions. The remaining guards were caught between conflicting orders: stop the broadcast or capture the intruders. In that moment of hesitation, Lyra reached the terminal and activated the facility's emergency protocols. Biohazard containment initiated, announced the automated system. All personnel must remain in current locations until decontamination procedures complete. Protective barriers slammed down between different sections of the chamber, separating guards from their commander, and creating a momentary advantage for the infiltrators. The broadcast is reaching the entire administrative district, Varu reported. Civilian channels are picking up the signal and amplifying it. Vox, now isolated with only Jace and Lyra, in his section aimed his neurodisruptor at Lyra. You will pay for this contamination of pure minds with your corrupted propaganda. Jace stepped between them, his stolen sonic blade activated. You'll have to go through me first. Vox's thin lips curved into a cruel smile. With pleasure, human. Your species always did rely on emotional attachment rather than rational calculation. It's why you lost the war. He fired the disruptor, but Jace anticipated the move, diving aside and rolling into a fighting stance. Years of survival in the most brutal environments had honed his reflexes beyond what the Vardek considered possible for a primitive species. The fight that followed was vicious, and calculated Vox with his genetically enhanced strength and combat training. Jace with his raw survival instinct and adaptability. They exchanged blows and counters, each seeking weakness in the other's defense. Your empire is built on lies, Jace growled as he parried a thrust from Vox's secondary blade. You preach genetic superiority while engineering your own downfall. Better extinction than contamination. Vox responded, his voice still eerily calm, despite the intensity of their combat. Purity is worth any cost. As they fought, Lyra and Varu continued broadcasting the damning evidence throughout the Empire's communication network. Screens throughout the facility showed growing civil unrest in various districts as citizens absorbed the implications of what their leaders had concealed. Vox, Lyra called out, "The people are turning against the program. Surrender now and help us transition to a more sustainable approach." Never. He snarled, momentarily distracted, which was all the opening Jace needed. With a decisive move, Jace disarmed Vox, sending the neurodisruptor skittering across the floor. He followed with a strike that drove the Vardek commander to his knees. "Finish it!" Vox demanded, his posture still rigid with pride even in defeat. "Prove the barbarism we've always accused your kind of harboring." Jace held the sonic blade to Vox's throat, his breathing heavy from exertion. For a moment, the rage that had fueled him for years, the memory of his sister taken for experimentation. The countless humans he'd seen executed in the name of genetic purity threatened to overwhelm his restraint. "Jace," Lyra said softly, approaching them. "Not like this. We're fighting for a world where execution isn't the answer to difference." The blade trembled in Jace's hand. He wouldn't show the same mercy. "That's why we must," she replied, her luminous eyes holding his gaze. "To prove that empathy isn't weakness, it's evolution." After a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Jace lowered the blade. "Restrain him. He'll stand trial before his own people, and they'll decide what justice looks like when they know the truth." As facility security protocols continued to isolate different sections, reports flooded in through Varu's connection to the network. Throughout the administrative district and beyond, citizens were demanding answers from their leaders. In some areas, workers who had been classified as genetically suboptimal were rising up against their supervisors. "We need to move," Jace urged. "The facility lockdown won't hold forever." Using access codes extracted during Varu's interface with the system, they navigated through emergency exits, taking the restrained Vox with them as both prisoner and shield. Outside, they found the city in the early stages of revolution, confusion giving way to outrage as the truth of Project Purity Ascendant spread. "Citizen override protocols have been activated in 3 districts," Varu reported, as they moved through crowds of bewildered Vardek citizens. "The resistance networks are mobilizing to assist those seeking evacuation from compliance zones." They made their way to a predetermined extraction point where Mara waited with a stolen Vardek transport. Her eyes widened at the sight of their prisoner. "You caught the big fish himself," she remarked, helping secure Vox in the transport's holding cell. "The people caught him," Lyra corrected. "We just showed them the truth." As they ascended above the city, the scale of the upheaval became clear. The neat, ordered districts of Vardek society were now in various states of disorder, some areas calm, but with clear signs of civilian control, others marked by confrontations between security forces and newly awakened citizens. "Where do we go now?" Jace asked, the adrenaline of combat and escape finally beginning to subside. Mara pointed toward the distant horizon beyond the city limits. "There's a region the Empire never fully conquered, the Wildwood. The terrain was too unpredictable for their ordered minds, the indigenous species too adaptable to be easily subjugated. That's where the remaining Lyrans took refuge," Lyra realized, hope kindling in her voice. "And where humans, Lyrans, and dozens of other species have been building something new," Mara confirmed. "Not a perfect society, but one that values difference rather than fearing it." 5 years later, the community that had grown in the shadow of the Wildwood's massive trees was unlike anything the former Vardek Empire had ever permitted to exist. Dwellings, built from a harmonious blend of technology and natural materials, dotted the landscape, some nestled in the forest floor. Others embracing the ancient trunks of trees that had witnessed centuries of galactic history. Jace stood on the observation platform he had built with his own hands, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues that reminded him of Lyra's opalescent skin. The settlement had grown significantly since their arrival 5 years ago. Refugees from the continuing reformation of Vardek society joining those who had already found sanctuary in this place of acceptance. "There you are," came a familiar voice with its musical lilt. Lyra climbed onto the platform, a small child balanced on her hip. The girl, no more than 3 years old, had skin that shifted between human tones and subtle blue luminescence, her eyes holding the same determined glow as her mother's. Hope wanted to watch the sunset with her father. Lyra explained, passing the child to Jace's waiting arms. Hope's tiny hands immediately reached for the scar on his cheek, a mark from the final confrontation with Vox's loyalists during the chaotic months following the revolution. "Story, Papa," she demanded with the directness of a child who knew she was loved. "Which one, little star?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The one where you saved Mama from the monsters," Hope replied, settling comfortably against his chest. Jace exchanged a glance with Lyra, who smiled encouragingly. They had decided early on that their daughter would know the true truth of her heritage and the struggle that had brought them together, albeit in versions appropriate for her age. "Once upon a time," he began, his voice softer than anyone who had known him as a mercenary would have believed possible, "there was a brave princess who was different from everyone around her, because she could feel others' feelings." Hope supplied familiar with this part of the story. "That's right," Jace continued. "And some people were afraid of her gift because they had forgotten how important feelings are." As he continued the simplified tale of rescue and revolution, Lyra leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Below them, the evening activities of the settlement continued, a gathering in the Central Commons, children of various species, playing together, researchers in the community laboratory, working on technologies that served life rather than controlled it. "And the reward for saving the princess," Hope prompted when Jace reached the end of the story. He smiled, looking from his daughter to his wife. The reward was finding a family, finding home. Hope seemed satisfied with this answer, as she always was. To her, born into a world where difference was celebrated rather than feared, the idea that people had once been executed for their heritage was as distant as ancient mythology. Later, after Hope had been tucked into bed in their modest but comfortable dwelling, Jace and Lyra stood outside under the stars. From a distance came the sounds of music, a blend of human melodies and Lyran harmonics that would have been forbidden under the old regime. The Settlement Council approved the expansion today. Lyra mentioned, referring to the plans to accommodate a new wave of refugees. "And they've asked you to lead the security training again." Jace nodded, his expression thoughtful. "The Vardic reformists are making progress, but the hardliners are still causing trouble in the outer territories." "They're a dying ideology," Lyra assured him. "Even their own genetic research has shifted focus, studying diversity as strength rather than contamination." He looked at her, still sometimes amazed by the journey that had brought them here. "Do you ever regret it? Exposing the truth, knowing it would tear apart your father's world?" Lyra considered the question seriously, as she did all things. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that so many suffered before the change came." She touched the simple band she still wore on her wrist, her mother's keepsake. "But I don't regret fighting for a world where our daughter can be both Vardic and Lyran and human, and never have to choose between her heritage and her heart." Jace drew her closer. "From execution platform to revolution in a single day. Not how I expected that mission to go." She laughed softly. "The best rewards are the ones we never knew to hope for." Above them, the stars of distant systems twinkled, some harboring worlds still caught in old patterns of fear and genetic obsession. Others beginning to follow the path that Lyra and Jace had helped forge, a path where difference was not merely tolerated, but celebrated as the true strength of any evolving species. And in a small bed nearby, their daughter dreamed of stars and stories, her very existence a testament to the power of saving a single life and the rewards that come from choosing compassion over fear.